No. All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the beautiful Assembly building here in Norfolk, Virginia. For those of you in person, welcome also to those of you online. So today, great afternoon. We're going to be learning about OTAs. So hopefully you're in the right room and you're excited to learn about OTAs. But we've got a great brief first by Mike, and then we're going to bring up some government folks from MISTIC, NSTIC, and IWRP OTA to learn, to hear from them about OTAs. And Dr. Julie Stark is going to moderate that. We'll do some Q&A, and then please join us. We're going to walk downstairs, go to the right, and kind of right across the street is Leone's, and you can join us for a no-host social from approximately 4 to 6 p.m. So we'd love to have you join us there. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Julie Stark to introduce the Mid-Atlantic Tech Bridge.
Well, thanks to everybody that took some time to be here today. We're really excited. I'm personally excited to learn more about other transaction authorities because as a person that's been a government scientist for 20 years, I still don't really understand how they work. I've learned a lot prepping for this. So I'm sure I'm not the only government person that needs to learn more. And the other great thing about it is that companies, both small and large, can also learn about how they can get involved, which will facilitate easier use of government contracting to get more and more industry partners working with government agencies. That's one of the many goals. So I'll backtrack a little. I'm one of the 3 directors of the NavalX Mid-Atlantic Tech Bridge. We have a small office. We're all Navy government employees from 3 different commands. I'm from NSWC Carderock, Combatant Craft Division right here in Norfolk. My colleague Joanne in the back is from Dahlgren, Dam Neck Activity, and Gerald, also in the back, is from Niwick Atlantic. The 3 of us work with the rest of the NavalX team. There's 18 tech bridges now throughout the world, 2 outside of the continental US. And we work to be a super connector between all types of partners, so non-traditional partners that might need a little bit more help learning how to work with the government and how to get through the government intricacies to get to things done. And our ultimate goal for our tech bridge at the MAT-B and all the other tech bridges is to make sure that we're getting the best technologies into the hands of the warfighters faster, more safely, more efficiently, to make sure that our warfighters are always having the best technologies. So there's a lot of different ways that we do that. Our Tech Bridge and others host a number of events. A lot of them focus on small business engagement, but many of them are for other things like this and networking events. Our LinkedIn page is a very good resource. Where many of our events are recorded and on that LinkedIn page and our YouTube channel and things, so you can see what's happened in the past. And then all of our upcoming events are also on the LinkedIn page. And we're trying to be better about advertising other tech bridges and what they're doing on their pages. Because just because you're part of this regional ecosystem and maybe your technology focus areas aren't exactly what our technical focus areas are, if your company or your organization is doing anything that you think will make a warfighter's job easier, safer, better, either our tech bridge will help you or one of our other tech bridges will. So just keep that in mind for other events in the future. I think that's all you wanted me to do is talk a little bit about Tech Bridge. So now we're going to move on and I'm going to invite the 4 speakers to come up. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. Do not come up. Now I'm going to invite Mike Coppola from Decode, who's one of the partners that is working through NavalX, which is the Division of Office of Naval Research that helps with funding and other things for the different tech bridges. He's going to start with providing an overview of other transactional authorities and what that means, and then we will have people from the different OTAs that will come up and talk about the specific OTAs. So we're going to let Mike give us talk, hold questions, I think, for the end of his short talk, and we'll go from there.
Great. Thanks, Dr. Stark and the Mid-Atlantic Tech Bridge and 757 for inviting me to be here to speak with you all today. As Dr. Stark said, my name is Mike Coppola, and I come from a company in DC called Decode. At Decode, we advise both government and industry clients, and one of the focus areas is non-traditional tools to allow for more innovative procurement, and an OTA can be just that. OTAs are nothing new. They've been around for decades, but they're making a comeback. You may have seen a little bit about that. DIU uses them extensively along with other agencies. And in particular in the DoD, OTAs have become a very popular mechanism to bring new technology into the government. Billions of dollars are spent on OTAs every year. This brief is designed to give you a fundamental background. An OT manager will know everything and more about what the process is for an OTA. This should give you enough to be dangerous and have a conversation with them. Can we go next? Yep. All right, so to dive right in, other transaction authorities, OTAs, you might see them as OTs. They're a procurement tool that lives outside the FAR, as you can see on your cone of contracting there. And they give government a broader discretion. They're not bound by the regulations of the FAR, which is the Federal Acquisition Regulation. So what it really means in a nutshell, they're not subject to the regulations, statutes that a traditional contract and a FAR-based procurement would be. And that opens the door for more flexibility, for increased speed to be on contract. This authority, as I said, have been around for decades. NASA started using them in the 1950s, and they've recently picked up steam as a flexible procurement vehicle to work with non-traditional vendors. You'll see the term non-traditional contractors a lot, or abbreviated NDC, which confused me the first time. And that has a very defined, it has a very clear definition that I'll get onto on the next slide. In the world of OTAs, like what does a non-traditional mean? It's important to note that the authorities differ somewhat from agency to agency. I have a list of references at the end that will kind of direct you to what those agencies' specific regulations are if you're interested. Some OTs don't have an end date, and some Congress has to renew each year. So speak with the OT panel today if you want to know more about their specific ones, but we also have resources here for you at the end. The DoD itself has guidelines on OTs, and then each agency has their own. So although the DoD might only restrict to a certain degree, let's say, for instance, we're working with the Navy here, they'll have additional regulations and policies in place. Can we go to the next slide, please? So here we'll go over some OTA phraseology. I've already mentioned the non-traditional contractors. There's a couple other key terms here for all of us to know. OTs are there to motivate a contracting staff or a program office to identify new players that can bring an innovative thought or an innovative product to the market of the DoD. So the first piece is important, non-traditional contractors. This is typically defined as an organization that has done less than $50 million of revenue in the government market, and they have no current contracts subject to full cost accounting and have not had a full cost accounting contract in the previous 12 months. So if they meet that threshold, they'll be considered a non-traditional. You also see this term significant. Significant participation is not clearly defined in the OT guide. It's up to the AO to determine if the participation from a non-traditional meets their threshold for significant. It's a fairly loose definition, but it doesn't mean that it's a great way for a traditional vendor to kind of sneak around the FAR to get on contract. The real focus of the OTA is to bring that new technology into the market. The other thing about OTAs, it provides a flexible tool for scaling solutions. So you'll hear the term production OTAs. We'll talk more about that later. But it's a follow-on to a prototype OTA, which is sort of like a pilot program for a contract or a small scale to validate that the product is the right fit for the requirement. If the pilot or prototype works, you have the ability to contract for a follow-on production OTA. And like I said, we'll discuss that more. So very similar to a sole source, that production OTA, another avenue for finding an easier vehicle to scale your solution. Keep in mind here that there is an end date on those production OTAs. So if your industry have the what's next in mind when you're approaching these, and if you're a government partner, maintain that open line of communication with the vendor to make sure that they're thinking what's next and it falls in line with the program offices that you're aligned with. Next slide, please. So OTA types, one of them, research. As you see here, basic, applied, or advanced research. Key for the research OTAs is that the research being done does not duplicate research that's done elsewhere in other DoD programs. Cost sharing in a research OTA is typically 50-50 between the industry partner and the government sponsor. And this 50-50 split is designed to highlight that it's a dual use technology for both industry and for government use. So there is a pathway to commercialize the technology in the future with industry, and it also helps keep those industry partners motivated and engaged through the cost sharing model. For prototype OTAs, there are a few criteria that if the prototype or if the vendor meets, they're eligible for a prototype OTA. So I can list these out. At least one non-traditional contractor or nonprofit research institution is participating to a significant extent, again, that term significant, in the prototype project. So that's one avenue. Another, all significant participants other than the federal government are small businesses, including those participating in CIBR or T2 technology transfer programs, or non-traditional contractors. Another, at least 1/3 of the total cost for the prototype is paid out of funds provided by parties other than the federal government. So a few different pathways. The final is the senior procurement executive for the agency determines in writing that it's an exceptional circumstance that warrants going outside of the FAR for the contracting. And here at the bottom for production OTAs, the pathway to a production OTA is through a prototype. It will be disclosed in the solicitation of the prototype that there is a potential for a follow-on production OTA. And it is supposed to be defined upfront before the prototype what the cost, what the estimated value will be of that production. But you know, it's sometimes hard to define that value up front. So if that isn't defined, maintain those communications with your government sponsor as you go through the production or as you go through the prototype to see if they have refined a little bit more what that production would look like. So reminder, 2 criteria for going to a production OT without any competition. If the prototype OTA had competition involved in the selection process and the prototype met all of the requirements for the government. Next slide, please. So here are some advantages of an OTA. We've talked about some already. One being that there's increased speed and flexibility, and the increased speed is potential. It won't always be faster, but there are often times where it is faster than going through the FAR-based methods to be on contract. If you're new to OTAs, that's okay. There are multiple services and multiple areas where you can find more information. DAU for the government stakeholders has a great course that informs you. And then services and PIA partners know more about them as well. So do a little bit of research, but you can find out more. Now, what it means when you put out your initial scope for an OTA to get a white paper submission, you get to have that conversation with the vendor. Typically, the initial scope statements on an OTA solicitation will be short, like 1 or 2 paragraphs. And then you have the opportunity as a vendor to have a direct conversation with the government agency, give a little bit more information on your solution, and then during the down select process, you will be producing a more detailed white paper. So for the government, turn to OTAs if you want new vendors and you're looking for great innovation. Next slide, please. All right, so how do you get started? If you want to leverage an OTA, you'll most likely want to go to an existing OTA contract or leverage a consortium that is already out there. And we'll talk about the consortium in some follow-on slides. So rarely will you receive the authority and approval to stand up a new OTA, though that can happen. It does require a little bit of experience. So like I said, there are resources and organizations out there that can provide additional guidance on that. And they can help connect you and think through whether this is the best vehicle for you. Because an OTA is not a one-size-fits-all solution. They're typically tailored towards a very specific need or requirement. You will assume a little bit of risk as a vendor because you don't have the protections granted by the FAR. And an example process for leveraging an OTA is similar to what's up on the board here. So as you can see, it starts with a problem statement defined by the government. They have a down selection process. And for that problem statement for the government sponsors, these are typically outcome oriented, so not specifically drilling down into the minutia of requirements. They're not over prescriptive on that initial outcome problem statement. And that opens the door for a wider array of innovative vendors that maybe would be excluded if you narrow down a requirements-based solicitation. Interested companies and vendors write a short response about how they meet the needs of that problem statement and what solution they bring to the table. And then typically there's a round of down select, including a conversation between the vendor and the government sponsor. Following that, as we mentioned, different from traditional sort of contracting and down select opportunity because you do have that opportunity to have the direct conversation. If a vendor is selected to the next round, usually a longer page response or a technical volume is submitted to be considered for the award. Once that's evaluated, the government customer or whoever is managing the OT then follows the traditional competitive award process. So it's relatively quick compared to a FAR-based contracting action. Next slide, please. So there are two ways for awarding an OTA. One is the direct award. So you have direct awards and consortiums. The direct awards made by a transactions agreement officer, similar to a contracting officer, to the awardee. Some government organizations have OTA awards, examples being DIU or Silicon Valley Innovation Program. On the other hand, there are consortium. Consortia are super interesting. We'll talk a little bit more about them on the following slides, but they're nonprofits set up by the government and a consortium manager. And it's a third-party vendor who manages on behalf of the government some sort of association. They're typically centered around a specific technology area, and in the resource slide at the end, it shows a list of consortium, or it has a link to a list of consortia and their focused technology areas. Next slide, please. So I'll give you a minute to read this quote that kind of captures that focus area model of the consortia. And they cover a wide array of technologies and industry areas. All right, next we'll have a little view of using an OTA through a consortium. So the government leverages a consortium and consortium manager. The consortia is run by a nonprofit party, as I mentioned, and it organizes to pull together all the paperwork. So it reduces the administrative burden for the vendors that belong to that consortium and also for the government and what they have to intake from their solicitations. They also manage their community. as well, and the different awards that are passed down to their members. Not all OTAs have to leverage a consortium, but in the model, a lot of times the non-traditional community and the traditional community will pay a membership fee to that consortium. And that's just like a joining fee for being part of their network. With that fee, they have access to all the scope statements that have been provided by the government through that vehicle. And then whoever is in that consortium is allowed to bid on an OTA. The consortium manager handles the entire process, including the award, and then the government pays the consortium, who then pays the award. So pretty easy, right? All right. There is another resources link that dives a little bit deeper into consortium, but this is a good overview for enough to be dangerous, like I said. So there are pros and cons to working with consortia. So if we go to the next slide, please, we can talk through that. The government typically only pays the consortium when the awards are made, and they'll take a percentage of the consortia will take a percentage of the award as part of their fee for managing the service. So there's a trade-off there. They do most of the administrative lift. They have access to OTAs and have gone through the process before, so it removes a little bit of risk to the vendors, but they also don't do that for free, right? You have someone managing the award for you, and since the consortium manager is organizing the competitions, you get more protection. Because remember, we said using an OTA, you lose some of the protections of the FAR, so this is a way to mitigate that risk. This could be helpful if you don't have the same protections or you don't have the workforce to handle the day-to-day that is involved with OTA. On the downside, they don't reach as many non-traditional vendors. They'll only reach the members of that consortium. And if the consortium manager has not done a good job of soliciting the community, then the amount of inputs into that OTA are reduced. And lastly, OTAs are not always faster, so please plan accordingly if you're thinking about going through this pathway. So if you decide that OTA is the best for you, make sure that the consortium is incentivized and has a solid plan. You can have those conversations with them, and that they're reaching out to a larger non-traditional community. Next slide, please. All right, so we'd be remiss to ignore with increased popularity comes increased scrutiny. So the OTAs we see them sometimes being held up post-award for GAO to conduct an assessment of the award process. So be aware of that. It's a great and valuable tool, but not always the right tool. So have conversations with an OT manager, have conversations with the government sponsors to make sure that it's the right fit for your solution. Other things to consider, they're not always faster, so have a plan and a process in mind. It requires an empowered and experienced staff. So it's hard to just come in off the street and join an OTA. You need to seek out additional knowledge or experts. There's increased risk without the FAR, as we've mentioned. There are implications on intellectual property and cost accounting data. So this is long-term, right? It provides you more flexibility as a vendor short-term and to those production OTAs, but if your ultimate goal is to be on a program of record, you will be subject to the same regulations that you would under a FAR-based pathway. And if you have any additional questions, you can talk to Decode. You can also talk to anybody in this network. I'm sure the panelists have a wealth of knowledge around this, so reach out and ask. All right, quick pop quiz before we move on to our panel. Next, please. Number one, softball. To use an OT, you must award through a consortium. A lot of head shaking. False. Great. Number two is a little bit of a curveball. Even though an OT is termed an agreement, it is a contract. True. Good. Since the Competition and Contracting Act doesn't apply to OTs, competition and fairness are not a consideration. False. There is a competition for the award of the OT. And then 4 OTAs can be used for any acquisition. Great. Thank you for paying attention based off of your answers. All right. Next up, if you want to take a screenshot online or a picture on your phone, here are those helpful resources. Of course, and I did add, Julie, Dr. Stark, there is a link for existing OTAs after, yeah. Well, thank you for the feedback. But yes, there's a guide. The guide has a great section at the bottom of myths, and it will walk you through like common myths of OTAs, similar to the quiz we just took, but a little bit more in detail. The report to Congress for OTA usage in 2022 has a bunch of great graphics that show the distribution for technology areas, for agencies, and the 2023 one's in draft. So if you're interested, keep an eye out for that. A comprehensive list of consortia and their focus areas can be found on that MITRE site. And then best practices for industry and gov is another great tool for you. That's it from me. Thank you for your attention. I'm excited to sit in on this panel with you all, and I'll hand it back over to you, Tina.
Thanks, Mike. All right, so for those online, we're going to take about a 10-minute break. We're going to get the speakers, the panelists up here. Those of us in the room, feel free to chat for a little bit. I didn't mention, but there's bathrooms on this level. So if you go straight out, they're to the left. So feel free to use the restroom, but 10 minutes. So I'll bring you guys all back in here in about 10 minutes, and we can have the government panelists come up here, and we'll be back shortly online.
All right, welcome back to OTA Day here at Norfolk Assembly, hosted by the Mid-Atlantic Tech Bridge. Thank you again for being here. So now what we're going to do, thank you very much, Mike, for going over OTAs. That was great, a lot of basic information. Now what we're going to do, we've invited the people that are managing 3 of the OTAs that are going to talk a little bit about their OTA and some specifics. So I'm going to start with asking each of the people to introduce themselves, introduce their other transaction authority consortium. If it is a consortia, that's something I learned. I thought it had to be a consortia. Apparently it does not. So to introduce themselves, their consortia, tell their focus area for their particular OTA and the geographic region where they are. So we're going to start with that, and then I have some other questions. If you have a question after their introduction, we do not need to wait till the end. If you raise your hand, then my colleague is going to bring you the microphone. We need to use the microphone for any conversation. Otherwise, the folks online will not hear. Tina, am I missing anything? Okay, great. So Jacob from Mystic OTA, please start with telling us a little bit about yourself and your OTA.
Thank you very much, Dr. Stark. Can everybody hear me? Good.
Just make sure you keep it up.
Okay. Hi, my name is Jacob Udell, and I am the Mystic OTA PM. Just a little bit about myself. Prior to this role, I worked on one of the Navy's oldest ships, the Minesweeper ship, MCMs, and I was the in-service engineering agent for that. So this is more of a programmatic role for myself. I joined this role when Mystic was fresh to Philadelphia. So I'm out of the Philadelphia command. So I worked on, kind of starting this from the ground up. We definitely use our other OT counterparts for some advice and help along the way. We're probably the youngest here today. So everyone, thank you for coming. So again, Mystic. Mystic stands for Maritime Sustainment Technology Innovation Consortium. I think the big takeaway there is the S, which is sustainment. That's really our big focus under Mystic. We have 8 technology areas. I can quickly run down them. They focus on obsolescence, data transformation, cyber, fleet introduction technology, waterfront support, asset fabrication, supply chain, and then our biggest one is R&D. So we have 8 different tech areas that were developed by the Philadelphia Command, but we work with, obviously, Philadelphia. We've worked with Carter Rock, and we've worked NAVC directly and many other customers across the whole enterprise. So I'm excited to be here with everybody today and look forward to more questions. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Cindy Montreve, and I am from Dahlgren when I am representing NISTIC. And NISTIC you can think of as the Navy Surface OTA, right? So you do have Keyport, Newport who run subsurface. We are Surface Navy, and that is our main focus. I have 23 technology areas basically spanning, I can't name them all, spanning all the breadth and scope that the Dahlgren and Damnac activities do for us. So we are quite busy. I'm proud to say this year we've awarded an obligated $1 billion ceiling, or no, obligation of $1 billion, $2 billion ceiling. So we have been very busy and very, very active. So looking forward to any questions you have.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Don Sallee. I'm with NavalX Atlantic out of Charleston, South Carolina. I'm going to talk a little bit about IWRP, and then I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Scott here, who is so very excited to talk about it today. So IWRP stands for Information Warfare Research Project. It was founded in 2018, one of the first 3 Navy consortia that was actually established. We're a little bit unique in the fact that we actually support our entire SysCom. So NavalX Atlantic is an Echelon 3 organization, fits up underneath NavWar at the SysCom level. IWRP, we can use it across the SysCom. So we have ordering officials in San Diego. We have ordering officials in Washington Navy Yard, Charleston, South Carolina. And our consortia, right now, a little over 800 companies, is spread all across the United States. So we're a little bit unique in the fact that we move around quite a bit just to make sure we're engaging with industry, trying to remove barriers, have that collaboration and executing. The technologies that we support are primarily in information warfare, so think cybersecurity, networking, software engineering, microelectronics, big data and analytics, those types of things. So it's a very powerful tool. We were also the first Navy organization to actually start transitioning prototypes into production, and haven't really slowed down ever since. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Scott.
Hey everyone, and thank you for the invitation to speak on this panel. I'm the new program manager for IWRP. I'm also a NIWC LANT person, but I'm out of Tampa, Florida. I have a robust background in S&T development, prototyping, worked with SOF, Marines, all of those folks down in my regional area. Through IWRP, we are supporting those naval information warfare customers. So that's pretty great. And with the new contract that we have with our consortium management firm, that's the model that we use. I know Mike introduced that. We actually have a 10-year period of performance and an undefined ceiling. So we're continuing along those lines of reducing those barriers to entry, opening up the aperture. We also have 3 new tech focus areas where we're looking at quantum technology, things in the electromagnetic spectrum, and optical comms. So if you have any questions, I'm on LinkedIn. Please feel free to reach out to me. Go to theiwrp.org, and I'd be happy to talk to you.
So one of the things that was mentioned is that there is a cost associated with joining a consortium. I don't even know if this is an appropriate question, but my first thought, since I now in this hat, I'm work with companies and we're trying to get more industry partners working for the government. So my thought was, how is it cost prohibitive from a smaller company, or does a small have to work with a bigger company? So if you're allowed to do so, can you say the approximate cost that it would take for an organization to join your consortium?
I can start there. It's pretty easy for Mystic. It's free to join under Mystic. So our consortium management firm is ATI. Our public website is mystic.org, so mstic.org. And that's where the easiest way where you can just click a link to apply. You'll need a cage code, a DUNS number, UIE number, and DD2345, which is pretty standard amongst any competition with the government. But it is free to join, so happy to.
And just to follow on to that, so any of the industry partners that are either here or online, all those codes he just talked about, all of those are the codes you get when on sam.gov when you join and get the appropriate approvals to be funded by the U.S. government. So all the things he just rattled off is all associated with sam.gov.
So again, for NISTIC with an N, yeah, we're free to join. Same thing. So we use ATI. And nice thing about our consortium manager is they have a lot of networking opportunities for the members, right? So if you can only, so we put an RPP out on the street and you can only meet one objective, they will link you up with other companies. So that is a great benefit to join, like I said, free of charge.
So for IWRP, we actually do have a consortium management fee that we, for small businesses, we try to reduce the barriers of entry there with our consortium management firm, ATI. It's about $250 annually, but there are other resources that come with that membership, such as engaging with Tech Connect and GovMates. I don't know if you all are aware of that particular resource, but it's good if you have technology and you're not sure which government customer or partnering you would like to do. And then also for academia and nonprofits, it's free to join.
Sorry, I wanted Jessica to go through that, but I wanted to maybe bring up a slightly different approach to something that Mike, you said earlier. When you're talking about non-FAR based, it increases risk to business. What I would say is joining the consortia actually gives you an opportunity to reduce your risk with the government. And what I mean by that is in a FAR-based world, you see a solicitation on sam.gov, you have very little interaction with what that solicitation actually means. Then you're going to spend your business development dollars trying to go after this opportunity, and in some cases can cost tens of thousands of dollars on the chance that you may or may not have come close enough to be relevant to be one of the selected awardees, right? When you join a consortia, that nominal amount affords you the opportunity and direct collaboration with the government to learn whether or not what you're there to provide or what you can provide is more aligned to what the government is looking for. So it's really giving you a business decision opportunity up front as to whether or not this is something you would want to invest your business development dollars in going after. So I would offer that up. The second thing is the benefit of collection of those consortium management fees for us within IWRP. That's what's allowing us to get out to all these different regional locations, having direct industry days. We have industry days in San Diego. We've had industry days up here. We have them in Charleston. Face to face. We also have virtual industry days. Those consortium management fees are going in to feed into that, those types of engagements to allow us to have those opportunities with y'all. So I would just like to offer that up.
So Don, that made me think of another question related to would you say is the best way to each of you for industry partners? Is the best way then just to join your consortia or reach out to them to find out what the events and activities are? Or how would you say is the best way for industry partners to become part of your community?
So the easiest way for any company to join the Mystic OTA is simply to go to mystic.org. There's a link right there, and it'll ask you the few basic things that we mentioned earlier, and then you can become a member. One thing I'd like to add as well, so being part of the consortium not only gives you the opportunity to listen to the government statement of needs and start collaborating with the government, but something I found interesting on the very first, collaboration event that I attended myself is industry is also collaborating with industry. So at these events, you may be a small mom and pop, but there will be the larger companies there as well. Maybe there's a project that's going to be presented that day that you want to work with them on, but maybe that doesn't work out. Maybe there's something in NISTIC or IWRP that they're working on, and hey, they can make that connection there. Or maybe there's other opportunities out, in the DoD industry. So not only are we, looking at the specific projects from the government, this offers you an opportunity to collaborate with other industry partners as well.
And something NISTIC did this year for the first time was we offered what we called a reverse industry day. So we had all our government technical points of contact available for a whole day, and we had all our members sign up. You were given the opportunity for a 20-minute session, half-hour session to come talk to them, bring them your ideas, because we don't know what we don't know. We don't know what you guys are developing, what you might have developed for IWRP or for Mystic, and might be with a little bit of tweaking relevant to the Surface Navy. So that's something we're looking forward to. We had a great attendance, and as a part of the membership, you'll see that. And there's also, if you just go to these web pages, you see upcoming events. You can look at all the technology areas, and you can see without even joining some basic information.
So to echo some of what Cindy and Jacob were talking about, something that we discuss a lot whenever I'm briefing IWRP is partnering. For us on the government side, a more robust solution could come from that partnering. Not everyone is going to have every facet of the answer, right? So that's why we are encouraging academia, small business, non-traditionals, and even large businesses to engage in IWRP. And then also the first part of the question, to join IWRP is relatively easy as well. You go to the IWRP.org and the link to join is there. I'm very accessible as well as the ATI program manager. So you will get to talk to me if you go through that route. The requirements to join are along those same lines in terms of having the certifications that you need in order to get on sam.gov. But yeah, we're really stressing those partnerships, and it's something that we don't just talk about the partnership between the government and the consortia side, which we're always working to strengthen, but then that partnership across the membership of the consortia.
I'd like to add for IWRP and NAVWAR specifically, every solicitation that we plan to send out, we typically drop them about 2 to 3 weeks in front of an industry engagement, whether it's virtual or in person. But each one of those solicitations, those prototype opportunities, whether it's a full solicitation requesting full proposal, or if it's what we have a pre-solicitation, it's almost like a draft statement of work to just talk about, or even just a technical collaboration exchange. All of those are also advertised through e-commerce and sam.gov before we issue them out. We work with like in Charleston, the Charleston Defense Contractor Association, small business communities, and we constantly communicate with them to get this information out. If any of you see something within IWRP and the solicitations, the postings on e-commerce, if you're not already a member, just reach out to Jessica, myself, or ATI, and you'll be welcomed into an industry day to see what it's like before you actually commit to it, almost like a test drive, if you will, right? But those are opportunities there for you to kind of see if it's a right fit for you, and if not, we understand. But if so, we'd love to have you join and make good things happen.
So as I mentioned before, I personally have very limited use, and it was me calling another government person saying, "Hey, I hear you have a different way to do this. I need to buy stuff, and can you figure it out?" Is there? I didn't have any idea. I heard yesterday the number of 23, and then I heard 40 different OTAs. Is there competition amongst the OTAs, or do you all just want to figure it out together and be happy, glad, getting industry paid?
So we're actually trying to encourage collaboration across the OTAs. And so we have a community of practice where we engage on a monthly frequency, and that ebbs and flows, but we also have the ability to interact contractually as well. And that's something that we're actively exploring now.
So what I would just add to that too. So typically, at least within the Navy, if you have the ability to award a base OT to establish a consortia, you also have the OT authority to be able to do a direct research OT award or a standalone OT direct with a company or a team of companies to execute. Um, the bigger challenge that the Navy was looking at 6, 7 years ago when we started standing up the consortia to begin with was that they wanted to reduce competition. They didn't want to create that. So what DAS&P kind of provided a little bit of guidance on was that each SysCom, the warfare centers that are standing up, the consortias or their OT, their base OT, focus in on technology areas. And that's why you see the differences with MISTIC, NISTIC, IWRP, NASC, S2 March or SMARTS, depending on where you come from, how you want to pronounce it, right? But those OTs were specifically set up in a way to not necessarily create a stovepipe, but to create a focused technology investment by the Navy. But as Jessica has taught, we also put a lot of effort into standing up an OT community of practice that Jacob and I know Cindy's been a part of as well. So there's an opportunity for us to collaborate between naval organizations as well to also help reduce some of that competitive environment.
Yeah, and all the warfare centers are kind of bound by our technical capabilities that are defined by the headquarters. So we kind of stay within those bounds. And I know personally, if I see something come across or another agency, let's say the Army comes to me and says, we really have this requirement. And I'm like, well, no, that really, that falls better with Mystic or that falls better with IWRP. So we do reach out across each other and collaborate and communicate that. And we would definitely steer them to the appropriate OTA.
So can the Army and the Navy play nice together on an OTA?
So just to add to all that, yes, we have the community practice and it's been great. We meet usually monthly and we've met in person at least once at this point. But the idea is for all of us to get a better understanding of our different technology areas. So again, if something comes to my desk, maybe doesn't fit under sustainment, maybe it's better under NISTIC, well, let's have a conversation, Cindy. And that's how that can work. Another great, reason that we're doing this community practice is from learning from our mistakes. So personally, I can say that Mystic is probably the youngest here. I think I said earlier, we're about 3 years old. So we have a lot of growing pains, but instead of just going through the pains, individually, we work with each other to kind of make sure we're most efficient.
So speaking of efficiency then, can each of you give an example of in which you've had a successful OTA and how is it successful or where would you see opportunities for improvement?
So there's been a lot of successful projects, but I took some time to think about this, and there's a specific project in mind that had to deal with additive manufacturing. And for those that don't know what additive means, that means that 3D printing for the Navy. So it's not just 3D printing, plastic, but actual usable parts that for the Navy that helps with our supply chain and obsolescence issues as well, also being kind of stuck sometimes under different data rights with certain sole source providers. So additive manufacturing was a big project that came in front of Mystic OTA. And the reason I like to use this as an example, we wanted to rule out that certain parts could be made using this new technology for the Navy. We were able to make, I think, over 16 awards for this one project. And the reason I say that is the OT allowed for 16 different potential solutions to be ran through to completion. So this way the government can say, you know, we've tried maybe 16 different approaches that we like, and this is our favorite, or this is how we're going to prioritize them. The OT allowed us to kind of take multiple paths in parallel for this project to work. So I thought that, you know, using the OT was a great tool, allowed us to kind of explore this innovative space while developing prototypes.
A great example for the NISTIC OTA was, you know, the DoD and Pentagon came down with a clear signal about accelerating our hypersonic defense, and that was across the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force. So with that acceleration became a constraint on our mission test ranges and our portable assets that we go out and collect data. And we put a prototype up together. We released the RPP into contract award. It took us 90 days. Yeah, and now we have sensors out there in the broad ocean area collecting that mid-course and terminal defense sensor data that we need to move forward and, you know, with our threats against China and Russia. So that was a really good news success story. And then some lessons learned. We have really refined our process where our statements of need before they're released to the general membership, we put them before a panel. That's our legal, our you know, our chief engineer for the center. And so we have that kind of really refined, and happily to say that we've increased our award to 74% of what we put out for song.
Yeah, that's great stuff. A different perspective. Successful prototype by statutory, you know, talks about, you know, did you meet the milestones? Did you meet the deliverables? What I would offer up is success is have we delivered capability to the fleet, right? For us, we've transitioned 28 prototypes into production at this point, a little over $1 billion worth. Still not quite where Cindy's at. But the challenge there is, right, are we delivering the capability to the fleet? We, similar to what Cindy was just mentioning, we've made awards in the 90-day range. We've made awards at the 42-day range. There's different tools, different mechanisms that we can use to get to those. And I know Mike had touched on about speed, and it was very great the way you put it, Mike. Thank you. There is a misconception that OT means speed, right? If you look at it from a FAR-based to non-FAR-based approach, right? Again, looking at it from providing capability, it can take anywhere from 30 to 40 months to award a contract, a FAR-based contract, right? Anything close to $100 million or over, it's 2, 3, maybe even 4 years. After that's awarded, then you're fighting another, you know, anywhere from 90 to 180 days to get a task order awarded. So if you talk about capability, the first time that boots are on the ground to start supporting a requirement under a FAR-based contract mechanism, you're looking at 4.5 years, right? Under the OT, when you're knocking prototype awards in 90 to 120 days, even 180 days in some cases, that's boots on the ground within 180 days, not 4.5 years. So that is a speed in itself when we start talking about these things. The first prototype transition that we did to production was called the Long Range Low Altitude Range Control System, LARCS. And basically what it was the Marine Corps had recognized that they were having safety of flight issues on their ranges with the helicopter traffic and all the different things that were going on there. So they wanted to prototype a different communication system to try and help with their aircraft safety. We made that award in 110 days. And about 6 months later, the prototype was delivered. It was considered successful. We transitioned into production within 4 months of that. They were given about a $30 million contract off of that, direct to the performer that produced that prototype. So within a 1 year time frame, we went from concept to application in an operational environment, significantly improving safety of flight for the Marines and their operations. So that was probably one of the bigger examples that I remember. The last thing I would just add, and I see Jessica's wanting to jump in here too. When you talk about transitioning into production, what I would offer you is production doesn't mean 50 units of X. Production is really operations, right? Is your product transitioning, can the prototype transition into an operational environment and provide that capability to the Navy and Marine Corps? It can happen in both other transaction for production, and it can also still be a FAR-based contract. A lot of times it depends on the company or the team of companies that's getting that sole source award. If they're already set up as a traditional and have the contract accounting system, sometimes it makes sense to go FAR, right? But if they're not, then we typically transition over to OTPs.
And I would just add another dimension of thought to this thought of success with working through the OTAs. In my mind, coming from a technical background, having the capacity to go from one end of the spectrum at ideation, market research, all the way through to production and a capability, that's something that is amazing, and we're really bringing the capability to the warfighter without having those transitions in between because of the contractual processes that we can be tied to. So I would just add that that's something that I'm thinking about every day, and really for me the goal with IWRP is, can we take this through to production?
Check, check. When it comes on. Okay, there we go. Yeah, Nathaniel Miller, Nessa Langley, new business. Julie, I was in a room with you maybe 8 years ago at DamNec, and we talked about what you just shared, going from an idea to performance, and we talked about what you just shared about taking 16 companies concept to demonstration. My question is about performance and feedback. So specifically, whether it's a specific market sector in a new technology area, and then specifically like with transforming technologies, you need a profitable company, but you also need a delivered capability. To the panel, what are the mechanisms for feedback, both to the companies that are performing in the communities and then also to the stakeholders investing in your consortiums? How is that working out? How are you actually enabling that kind of feedback?
So in our model, part of my role as the program manager is to work with the government body, NIWC LANT, NIWC PAC, NAVWAR, and we have technical points of contact within our organizations that we have to lean on as the facilitators of IWRP and our process to understand those requirements that are coming through. Because I'm not going to know the idiosyncrasies of what prototype that they're looking for. We need that TPOC. So we work through that construct.
Yeah, so two things to that. I view acquisitions as almost like a software development approach, right? Gone are the days where we're going to spend years coming up with a capabilities document and then spend the next however many years iterating that, trying to figure it out, long ECP processes. So the reason I bring that up is Mike showed you a fan chart, acquisition fan chart earlier. There's green areas. While the OTAs focus on one specific area, there are other challenges or other acquisitions within that green space. Prize challenges, CRADAs, PIAs. At LANT and through NAVWAR, we use those in collaboration with the OT. So we have project iterations, we have ideal concept discussions, and we use those forums to also help with industry engagement to collaborate. And it's important because the government requirements owners often don't know what they don't know, like what Cindy said. And it's great to get from industry what the technology trends are that y'all are tracking towards, right? Where are y'all investing your research and development dollars? And it kind of really feeds into us, right? So we use those different tools in some cases as almost like an acquisition stacking, like where you would go into one authority, you would exit from that authority, you would move into the OT to finish the prototyping process, maybe transition that into production, or maybe you do a CRADA out of the back end of an OT because you maybe didn't get the results you needed, but there's enough there that we want to keep iterating against it, right?
The different things that you're talking about now, could one organization have multiple agreements at the same time? So they could have a CRADA and OTE and another at the same time, right? Okay.
So you meant
Let him finish, and then we've got two questions. Thanks.
So just
Yes,
to
please,
answer the
Jeff.
feedback piece, there's many different levels of feedback I believe that the OT in general provides. First being through collaboration. So government will put out a statement of need, we call it here at Mystic, and collaboration immediately begins at that point. We like to keep it organic. So as the PM, I typically take a step back and let the technical points of contact talk back and forth with our consortium members. So there we'll get feedback. It could be as simple as maybe you're missing some documentation and it's confusing for industry. Well, at that point, government could then update their statement of need and add some information to help you out. Or maybe they could just tell you directly. There's many different ways, and it's strategic. So do we want to just give you the information directly or make it available for everybody? So feedback is kind of fluid throughout this entire process. And then once we do get white papers, as Mike mentioned earlier, there will be an evaluation done. You will get feedback on your white paper as well. And then the last aspect of feedback, I would say, is for every collaboration period we have, our consortium management firm, does a survey. So that's another avenue where the consortium can provide feedback, and that may be more holistic. So did you feel like there was enough time of collaboration? That's something that we've gotten feedback on, and sometimes we need to extend that period of collaboration so the companies can really take the necessary time to understand our requirements, talk with our technical points of contact. So there's feedback on many different levels that we try to incorporate to remain efficient.
And we have a question over there.
Good
Please hold the
afternoon.
mic disturbingly close to your mouth so that we can hear you.
Too close or not close enough? Okay. All right. Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity. I'm Todd Morgan from Kleck Consulting Group. And the question I have on a specific OTA solicitation, is it required to have an industry day for each and every one of those?
So for NISTIC, no. Sometimes it depends on the turnaround. It depends on the requirement. If the TPOC and the government technical area manager, they make that determination, and sometimes we'll do it virtually as well instead of in person. So not always.
And how about for IWRP?
Very similar to what Cindy was just saying. We value industry engagements because it gives us an idea as to whether or not we're communicating the requirements in a way that when you respond, it's what we're looking for, right? So we appreciate having industry days. Don't think of it as a formal, has to be a full day long at this session. Everybody's in a big holding pen, and it's not like that. The virtual events that we have literally can be set up as a 2-hour session. The technical requirements owners brief their topic. We have some collaboration discussions with the participants, and we both learn from it.
That typically doesn't take months to schedule. Okay, thank you.
They're usually at regular frequencies throughout the year for IWRP. So once you become a member, then you see that schedule, you know that frequency. They socialize it often. I would also add about the industry days, something to think about are the unrealized potential advantages. You have a government audience there as well. You have potential partners there as well. We try to align our keynotes with things that you're going to be interested in, ways to help socialize, what technical strategies we're driving toward. So there are other advantages than just the one-on-ones that we tend to have in the afternoon.
We're quite supportive of industry days. Just we had a particular instance where a potential customer had put together all the required paperwork, and then they were told you need to wait 3 to 6 months for the next industry day, and it died.
Prototyping's tricky. And I don't know that LANT is different when we're talking about the other warfare centers, but since we are Echelon 3, we do work with other government sponsors that we have to engage with to understand and to really vet those requirements appropriately. Things like CR that we come in and that come into play at the end of the year. Those are challenges that we are all navigating together. So we do acknowledge that that can be tricky.
Thank you very much.
Before we move to the next question, I was going to ask a similar question, and I'd like to give both Jacob and Cindy an opportunity, and IWRP as well, if you'd like to tell us a little bit more about your industry days, because I think that's new to a lot of people. So if you could just give us maybe a quick overview of your industry day, and maybe Cindy, even the reverse industry day, which sounds very interesting, and what the battle rhythm for those are, and then we'll move on to the next couple of questions.
Okay, so for Mystic, we found most useful that we do 2 cycles. We call them cycles and we call them collaboration events, similar to what you're explaining as an industry day. So we have one coming up in March that'll be in Philadelphia, and then we have one in July as well. The March event typically has an award around July, and the July event typically has an award around December timeframe. Those are notional estimates. In each collaboration event will have a keynote, as Jessica just mentioned. We also will give each technical point of contact about 10 to 15 minutes on stage to introduce their project to you. And then on the second day, we do one-on-ones. And when I say one-on-ones, I mean the easiest way to think of what a one-on-one session is like speed dating. You'll be sitting behind a table similar to this, and then on the other side will be your government counterpart, and you can have the opportunity to network and talk specifics about your project. We also have ad hoc, so that means out of cycle projects sometimes. We try to limit that because of obviously they don't get the benefits of a collaboration event, but they are on an as needed basis.
So NISTIC does an annual event, and our next one, next industry day is the 2nd of October. And we do ad hoc, so we're all kind of similar in that makeup there. We do offer one-on-ones the following day, and then we tend to put our industry day along with the general membership meeting of our consortium, and that way the government attends the membership meeting so they can hear the members talk about what their companies do, and then we'll get up and talk about what our needs are for that cycle. And like I said, again, as needed, we do out of cycles.
So we're somewhat similar in our approach. We have 3 in-person, we call them quarterly industry days or QIDs. Our next one's actually coming up the 22nd of October in Charleston, South Carolina. I'd love to see you there. And then in between, we are trying to push for virtual industry days. So that could either occur whenever topics don't make it to the industry day or things pop up. We also have the ability to do ad hoc industry days. I like to experiment, so I understand that my predecessors have played around with in-person tech demonstrations and things like that. So those are some things that I'll be looking at in the next fiscal year.
The other one I would just like to add to, over the last, I don't know, 2 years, we've actually also been executing classified industry engagements all the way up to the TSSCI environments. That creates challenge in itself. I know a lot of times that you may think that's more focused on traditional defense partners, not necessarily the case, believe it or not. But those are some of the other things that we do to try and make sure that we're meeting the demands of the technical requirements owners within our organization.
So as you're talking about these industry days, and I'm guessing my colleague Mike here, who I should have pointed out earlier, Michael Clark also runs a tech bridge. All of you are in places, and I imagine that the different OTA managers are too, where there are NavalX tech bridges, and we should be working together to help you. That's part of our job, and we've done some of that, but a lot of we all have resources within our regional ecosystem where we can advertise these, make sure that our regional ecosystem is aware of them, no matter where in the country they are, especially if they have a virtual component. So I made myself a note to reach out, and I'm going to make sure that you're aware of where the different tech bridges are, because our mission set is very similar. So we should definitely be working together to help you do that and make those connections. And we had a question over here too.
Hi, Dr. Justin.
So I can take that one on the last part of your question. Three of my solicitations for this upcoming cycle came from my reverse industry day. So I would say, yes, that's what industry pushed that idea and that gap to us. And we said, oh, okay, great. Yeah, we need to go after that. So yes. Um, so based on the SIBR and the STTR, I mean, we try to be as precise and understand what we want, but we're open to any and all. In that realm, right? So sometimes we don't know exactly what we're going after, and so we've taken projects that have civil rights and taken that on. So
So I think your question is very relevant to understanding where the organization fits within the Navy, right? So when you look at Mystic and NISTIC, well, I know NISTIC's Echelon 2 organization, right? We're Echelon 3, so follow the money, right? So we're not designing the car; we're helping the next iteration or prototype or pieces that go into the car to improve performance or uh, to make it last a little bit longer. Um, SIBRs are something that we know that we can use within IWRP. As an organization, we have not done a lot of those. Now, as far as your question on the Wild Wild West versus, right, so I would offer it, it's like the Western channel on cable TV, right? So you have you have one channel where, yeah, I'm not being specific at all. I need to figure out a cyber capability for XYZ, and you iterate based off of that. In other areas, it may be all the way down to I need this specific device that has to fit in this specific hole on the ship and have this specific power, right? And those things tend to be a little bit more restrictive, right? So there's a couple different things you can look at. Holistically within the Navy, though, all of our consortia, the way they are, it is a even mix of Echelon 2 organizations, Echelon 3 organizations. There's even been some prototypes we've done for Echelon 1. So you can go everywhere from big Navy concept to program of record to how do we kick this thing down the road in a life cycle for another 30 years.
I would just add, I don't know if you're aware, but some of the PIAs around, and you'll need to research this piece, are actually helping facilitate SIBRs and sitters. So I would encourage you, if I were in the shoes of someone who's a small business or non-traditional, look at it as multiple points of entry. We do have some challenges, as Don was kind of alluding to, in terms of working through our Navy SIBR office and understanding what those requirements are, deconflicting them, and you will see, that push for broadening and then specific. So that's just kind of, we're beholden to the TPOC there. I mentioned the TPOC before. So wherever that requirement's coming from, we don't have control over that.
Can I ask a follow on to what Don was saying? So what would you say, you sticking with your same analogy of choosing a channel? Is that based basically who has money to do something, or do you have some level of budget or direction within money from your command where you can also try to determine what a focus would be for you in the near or far term for your particular OTA?
So that's a great question. I've got an answer for you. So the vast majority of the prototypes that we award are direct funded via customer funds, right? So we have PEO or a different lab or something like that that is developing the base requirements. Earlier, I talked about acquisition stacking. So one of the interesting and kind of a lessons learned that we had a couple of years ago was that within our organization, there was a lot of focus on using IWRP to support technology requirements by outward-facing customers. Our command was slow to adopt IWRP to help us correct our own internal technologies, your business flows, your resourcing tools, your authoritative data sources, your dashboarding type concepts. In those environments, a lot of that is funded via POH type dollars uh, direct from the organization. Now, how we kind of get in front of that is we'll go and use a prize challenge to iterate what we can do, a small incentive award to find out what technology is there, maybe get a little bit more behind the scenes approach as to what's there. And then we'll take that and we either have the ability to transition directly into a prototype under an OT authority, or we can take that and prototype it within IWRP.
So before Jacob goes, so follow-on question to that. So if you're going to do a prize challenge through your OTA, does that come from the funding that I know with an OTA you take a little bit when the awards are given? Do you do it that way, or are you getting separate funding from either a direct customer or your command that says, we want a prize challenge, here's the topic, go?
Right. So to be clear, we're not actually awarding a prize challenge under an OT. It's a separate and distinct authority, but we use it as like entrance and exit criteria into a concept. So it can be direct funded from a customer if they choose to do that. We have done that in the past. We do production overhead, but a lot of times what happens is um, you want to know what's going on, and you don't necessarily have the pulse of industry. And uh, to be quite frank, right, you all are in here all trying to figure out how do I improve my odds and getting an award, right? The way we kind of incentivize companies to help participate so we can iterate those concepts is through that prize challenge. So it may be a small amount, but then we take that and then we'll transition into a production, or excuse me, a prototype environment.
Jacob, did you have something to add as well?
Yeah, I was just going to echo earlier about what Don was saying. So we have projects that are both extremely specific, like we know that we want a red square and it has to fit exactly to this. We also put out requirements that are, I have this problem. I don't know what the solution should look like. I'm leaving it up to you. And those are personally my favorite because I think we're using the OTA in the most innovative way possible. And of course, Don mentioned that, of course, when a project is very specific, that's restrictive, I would say. But something to keep in mind is that the collaboration should be fluid throughout the entire phase up until submissions. So I may say to industry, I need exactly this. It has to fit with these dimensions. It has to meet these standards. But I encourage you as a consortium member to come to the technical point of contact. You have the opportunity to say, I actually have something different. Have you thought about this? And many times we've seen situations where, have you thought about this? And you go back to the drawing board and you're like, I didn't know that existed. So then you can update your statement of need at that point and, continue the conversation. So it's not necessarily so rigid like a FAR-based requirement. Another thing I've been meaning to mention, and I keep forgetting, but similar to Cindy, for the first time, the Mystic OTA will be doing a reverse industry day. We're going to be calling it Tech Exchange, but tomato. And that'll be our first time will be during our March event. So it'll be part of our collaboration event. And same idea right now, Philadelphia is figuring out kind of the swim lanes for our consortium members to submit ideas to. So, a broad area topic. And then we'll pick a handful for our consortium members to present and have the necessary government stakeholders there to listen.
Interesting. And there it is. You have a question, sir? Can't hear you online.
First, want to thank the panel. My name is William Smiley, and I'm with the Technical Corporation. I'm going to kind of go back to the feedback perspective. And I got two areas. One is I put in for a RPP, for example, and it asked for some meal standards and things like that. I had completed those meal standards with another organization. And I put that into my solicitation as my proposal back. And I was wondering if a proposal comes out, a RPP comes out asking for, again, this widget, this electricity, this swap size, this, when a person puts in that they have just completed that same meal standard with another neighbor organization, do you have any leverage in that when you're putting that back in to say that, hey, I've met that requirement? Because it could be looked at, I guess, loosely, because when I put it in there, the second part is I got a summary back that said I did not meet the requirement, but I already had put in that I had met the requirement and I was with a different organization, which was NAV Air versus NAV C, all right, for example. Um, and also I added to that because part of the requirement was asking about a widget that is coming to end of life. So I also added, hey, you might want to go with this new widget, which also takes care of your supply chain. So I sent the response back. And I'm trying to find out. I never got anything back from IWRP, right? Understand, didn't get it, but I did give feedback to say, hey, we met all the things in our submission, as well as let you know that the widget that you're asking for is end of life coming up next year. So how do we get feedback that way?
So maybe I could broaden that and each of you could talk about the mode in which you communicate with anybody who's trying to participate in your consortia. So in addition to his question, if each of you could address that, I think that would be helpful information.
Yeah, well, first, let me offer up, if you have the direct solicitation number, please get with Jessica. We'll get you your feedback, right? I'm not blaming her. It's, she's a little bit more connected to you. If you email me, I don't know if I'll be able to get, the information to you in a timely manner. But feedback. It's probably an important, time to talk about culture, right? And not trying to make an excuse for our folks, right? But you have to understand that the vast majority of our workforce, I'm sure you all see this within your organizations as well. We've had 30 to 40 years of defense acquisition university training that says don't talk to anybody, right? So within our processes, that what is supposed to happen is that those who submit package to the solicitation, response to the solicitation, there is an area for the TPOCs to provide comments, and those comments are supposed to be released back to the folks who or the companies that submitted the solicitations. Those are reviewed by legal and our agreements officer, obviously, because we don't want to, necessarily say the wrong thing. So that is the way it's supposed to happen. I'm here to tell you, and I'll admit to it, it doesn't always happen that way, as you're kind of pointing out. The second piece is different evaluators at different organizations. And when we talk about understanding expectations, this is why I always valued industry engagement and open collaboration with companies, because through that collaboration, you get a better sense of what maybe the government's really asking for, not what's necessarily written. So if your evaluator had a different expectation that they didn't clearly articulate within the solicitation, that could easily translate into, well, yeah, you may have done that for another syscom, but it doesn't apply for ours because they're looking at that specific requirement. Now, I offered up, I don't know your specific instance. We can help you with that. But in general, just understand that, the culture is strong, right? And it takes a lot of space to turn an aircraft carrier. I'll just say that, right?
I would I would add that probably each of our organizations has experienced those challenges, right? And the fact that we're here today talking to you about our different consortia is pretty great because there are a lot of hurdles that our organizations had to get through in terms of those cultural bounds. I know that, coming in as the program manager for IWRP, I do understand that that is a challenge that I'm actively aware of and working. So yes, please do contact me. It does tie in with the culture. It's something that we're working at every day, and that's not how we want to do business. We want that open communication. I'm pushing for additional industry days beyond what we did before. We're trying to find that magic number and what works for IWRP. So I apologize for your frustrations, but I look forward to hearing from you soon.
And similarly, Dahlgren has the same issue, right? If we don't know if you're not getting the feedback that you requested. So I put my name and number out on our industry days, and it's out on our website. So if you're not getting feedback the way you think you should, then I welcome those emails and I will follow up. I think our TPOCs and our TAMs are busy. This is probably not their only job that they're doing. So again, we don't know what we don't know. So we want to open up that communication and respond. So please reach out if you're not getting the response you think you should.
Well, I can echo all of that. We definitely have some cultural challenges as well, and that's a big part of my job. I do training at least once a week to a different government stakeholder to help them understand how this all works. But of course, our brain is in the far world, and it's difficult for everybody to get their brain out of that. We do have a few areas where we try to help our TPOCs understand the process and how they should be communicating. We do rules of engagement prior to the collaboration event. We have an evaluation training as well. None of that's always perfect. We recently made it mandatory that if there's a collaboration event and your project is in cycle, you need at least one representative for the project there. So that forces them to be able to speak to you in person and have those rich conversations. Another thing I just want to mention is as the PM, we're not the technical SMEs. So statement of needs are put out. I read it. That looks good to me. But I only know what I know, and I'm not going to pretend I know more than that. So when I read a statement of need, I try my best. But we do lean on the technical points of contact in that realm. So yes, talk to them. That's the use the flexibility of the OTA and collaborate as much as you can. And again, I think we can all say the same thing. We are here if you're not satisfied with the level of collaboration and feedback.
So before we go to the question that I know is waiting online, I just want to follow up to what Cindy said. That's a very kind of echoing what Don said. It's a very unusual thing that as a government person, you go, well, here's my email, just contact me. Because in the past, we were always told you couldn't do that. I think the lawyers still don't like it. But that it is a slightly different world now. But I'm just wondering in terms of communication, one, is it truly better that they try to approach and go directly to the government person, or do they do that through ATI, I think manages or whoever's managing the different OTA, so which is usually a PO, which is a partnership intermediary agreement, which is a nonprofit organization that's the helps with the management of the OTA. So should they try both? That and then my other question similar to that was in the past and back in the day we'd have like a commercial services offering a CSO or a request for information. Any question that was received to the government, we basically put the questions together, the lawyers approved our words or not, and then we gave some very nebulous answer that the lawyers then changed into even more nebulous response, and that everything had to go out to everyone. With an OTA, can you actually, Cindy, if this gentleman or follows up with Jessica and says, Jessica, Don threw you under the bus. Tell me what really happened. Can you just respond directly to him without it going through all the lawyers and people?
Actually, I can. And I have followed up on LinkedIn messages too. Now, that's to say, if all 806 members hit me up on LinkedIn, it might take some time to get through that. But yes, it is a different landscape. It does feel weird putting my email out there and my phone number out there, but I'm serious. Contact me.
Yeah, and after our solicitation ends and the feedback is released, all our TPOCs and technical area managers know they have 2 to 3 week window that they should be getting questions back on the feedback, and they allow that time to answer those questions.
For us, I would just add too, right? Um, um, on the management, we'll call the management side, right? The one thing that we are all hyper focused on, and I'm sure Jacob and Cindy are in this area too. There are times when we get questions from industry directly about solicitation, and we look at what they say. We encourage the TPOCs to reach out to them and try and communicate, and that's point to point, right? There are other times when we see a repetitive number of times that a single or the same question keeps getting asked, at which point we will then release something out to the larger audience to try and clarify that. So.
So to answer your question, I can speak for Mystic. ATI has an executive committee, and probably the same for you folks as well. The executive committee are a small handful of the consortium members. They're voted in, and those folks are there to express industry's opinions, feedback, anything like that from a more holistic standpoint. So I think I mentioned this earlier, but a big piece of feedback that we've gotten from the executive committee was there's just not enough time to collaborate. You guys put these out, too last minute, so then industry doesn't have the time to facilitate and the travel to get to the event, and they just don't have enough time to consume everything we're pushing out there. So we were able to respond and kind of made the submission date a little further to the left. I apologize. So that's a piece that we use. Also, I would say more directly, if it's project specific, reach out to the TPOC. A lot of times, ATI should be your partner in releasing the burden for you guys. So sometimes ATI will reach out to me and say, hey, so-and-so told me that they've been trying to get a hold of X TPOC. X TPOC is not responding. I will personally ping that TPOC and make sure that they do respond, because that is the whole point of collaboration. But I would add, we are here, but use ATI to release that burden, as Mike said earlier, in many different aspects for you.
Yeah, before we go to the online question, I have a question specific to Jacob and Cindy. As far as collaboration regionally with the public shipyards and the commercial shipyards, is that something that happens within the OTA or not? What does that engagement look like, as far as, if it exists, as far as on the sustainment side and the surface side?
So sure. So we have Indian Head, who is in very close proximity to us. And they're in Maryland. We're in Virginia. It's a 30-minute drive over there. So they do explosive ordnance and whatnot. So we have a safety organization here in Dahlgren, and a lot of our Potomac Test Range and our E-Department collaboration work closely with Indian Head. And before they got their OTA, we developed a lot of their requirements for them and ran them through. So now that they're on their own and standing up their own OTA, we kind of know our swim lanes. We kind of know our technical point of contacts. We work with Crane. We have that professional circle of network of people that we know we kind of collaborate with. So that's kind of like where a lot of that collaboration happens. And then also at our level too, right? You said in our community of practice, and then other areas too. Like I'm the lead customer advocate as well for Dahlgren, so I have connections into the other warfare centers in that arena for all the other work that's being done. So there's different avenues for that collaboration.
I can add to that. So Mystic is allowed, the way it's written today is we're allowed to work with any of the Navy entities in the government. We've worked primarily with Philadelphia, of course, because that's the command we're out of. But the second most popular customer would probably be NSWC Carter Rock. Carter Rock has a very similar mission to Philadelphia. In fact, they used to be one command together. And Carter Rock doesn't have an OTA, so they've been a customer that we work very closely with. I've spoken, we actually did a project with the Naval Academy, talked to some shipyards as well. So anyone's welcome to kind of put forth and start the conversation. There is no limitations as long as they're within the Navy.
So you just said you've worked with, you're authorized to work with any group within the Navy. I'm curious, could you work with other DoD agencies? So I'm from Carter Rock, and before Mystic was around, there was an Army OTA that we used a lot for various things related to unmanned things, I'll just say. If another agency came to you, maybe NASA or DHA, whoever came to you and said, oh, this aligns to our technology need, is there any reason that they couldn't give you money to execute and do something on your OTA?
So I think that answer is probably specific to every consortium. The way Mystic works is if it's supporting the Navy, that's the way we have it written today, that it can work. So we've talked with the Marine Corps as well. There is definitely a gray area there, but if it's in support of the Navy, that would work for Mystic.
So NISTIC will work with other DoD agencies. We do work for the Army, or Air Force Lab. We do Marine Corps. We do a lot of stuff for ONR, the Navy. But yeah, multitude of different agencies, as long as they within our technology area. We wouldn't necessarily go out and work on sustainment work. It'd be like in the sensor area or safety. I mean, like I said, the work aligns to the tasking that we do in Dahlgren. So we will honor those.
But does it have to be a DoD agency, or could it be any government agency even outside of the DoD?
Any other government agency. It depended on the requirement of the prototype, right?
Mm-hmm. Don?
Yeah, so NIWC Atlantic specifically, NIWC Pacific specifically, we're working capital funded organizations. So we do support a number of joint programs. We support COCOMs directly. Uh, we support other DoD agencies. So we have executed prototypes for OSD, for the Army, for the Air Force, for the Marines. So it just really kind of depends on what the work acceptance looks like and if it's something that fits within the technology area of IWRP.
All right, so Pamela online had the following question. So in terms of business development ROI, are there any current statistics of how many small businesses actually win an OTA award through each consortium or as a standalone small business? So I guess, looking at some of your numbers of, awards to just small businesses.
So for NISTIC, or in FY '24, our numbers are 83% for small business, went to small business, or non-traditionals, which are typically small business.
Yeah, so IWRP, it fluctuates a little bit year to year, but on average, we're around the 75% area of non-traditionals. So I want to also kind of bring up a conflict that's happening within the DoD right now. The statutory authority dictates traditional, non-traditional. Whenever we make an award, the way it's processed within our authoritative sources, it doesn't assign small business or large business to that statistic. So we have to extrapolate that. So when we're giving you those numbers, those are legitimately, ATI helps us identify which of those awards go to actual small businesses. But a lot of times you will not see those small business metrics go anywhere outside of the OT simply because it's different than what the statutory authority requires.
But again, based on Mike's presentation earlier, non-traditional means they just haven't had a contract within the last 12 months, right? So it could be a large business who just hasn't had a contract like that in 12 months.
Yes.
Is that correct?
I'll give you a couple of examples, at least within IWRP. We have Cisco, Microsoft, Oracle. They are non-traditional defense partners within the OT. So kind of the point earlier, and that's not all the non-traditional, right? But to Jacob's point earlier is sometimes it's a teaming arrangement, right? It's taking the small businesses and using those relationships with some of those other companies to provide those products and services.
Well, yeah, just real quick that we do award to large business, right? The more traditional, the Lockheeds, the Boeings, and Northrop Grumman's. So we do track that. ATI does track that for us as well. So those small business numbers.
So we probably have time for maybe 2 more questions. I saw somebody with a hand up. So you, sir, you go ahead.
Hi, John Spruill with PMAT.
So for IWRP specifically, it can flow in a multitude of different ways. Because our OT is supportable by the entire SysCom, a lot of times we can get direct funding from the sponsor, and they will actually make the award under their authority and a prototype under IWRP. Most of the time, money will flow down to a particular office, division, or competency within our organization. They have a team of technical POCs that are working those projects. They receive the funds. They are also the ones that initiate the workflow within IWRP and will ultimately obligate those dollars. It can be. I'll share with you, last year was absolutely brutal with the way the CRs played out. Again, us being Echelon 3, we're at the very bottom of the funding flow. you know, there have been multiple times when we have gone all the way through a full evaluation of a solicitation, literally started building the award, and the budget office pulled the money back, right? So, you know, if you have a specific item, myself or Jessica, I don't want to throw Jessica under the bus, right? But but that's from an echelon 3 perspective. I'll offer it up to the other folks.
I just want to add to what Don was saying. So sometimes, I mean, I think in any regard, the funding can be pulled or something may happen externally where funding is no longer available. And we've come to a certain point, whether that's beginning execution or getting ready to make an award. Under the OT authority, is something that wasn't mentioned earlier, there is the basket provision. So the basket provision is a virtual or imaginary space for a project award or project submission to sit for up to 3 years, 36 months. So you know, we as PMs, I think my primary role is to make sure that the basket is not a place for projects to go and die. If you're going to put a project in the basket, there must be an intent to pull it out within the next 36 months. That allows us a huge flexibility for circumstances like Don was just mentioning, where maybe mid-execution things aren't going right, or funding gets pulled, or we're getting ready to make an award and now we can't make the award anymore. I always encourage our technical points of contact, get ahead of things. So if you know that in a year from now you're going to have an urgent request, but maybe it's not hair on fire just yet, put that through, get the submissions, get it in the basket, and then we can pull it out. So then you're not, you know, I need it yesterday, which is most of the case. So,
And I can tell you from somebody who's been more the user of an OTA, we learn to skip steps as much as possible. So if I'm Carderock and a PEO has asked Carderock to do something because that's our technical expertise, but I'm going to use one of their OTAs, I'm going to tell them, don't even send the money to me. I want it to go direct to them, and we figure it. We're learning, we're getting better at figuring that bit out because every government agency takes a little bit of the money just because they have to, right, to process it, and takes a little bit more time. So I think we're getting better throughout government about that step too. So if you want to finish up with one quick comment, and then we have one more question, and then we're going to have to wrap up. So Jessica, do you want to finalize that comment?
So with IWRP 3, we actually reduced the time frame for the basket from 36 to 24 months. That's one of the things that we're looking at in fiscal year 25. Moving forward, we've had some challenges with having to renegotiate. So that's why we shortened that time frame. So if you notice that, that's part of the reasoning as to why. That's all I had to.
So one more last quick question so we can allow the panelists a moment to have some final remarks. So one quick question.
Just a quick question. Are you guys familiar with the July 23rd OSD memo that came out that talks to OTs that you can use production money to actually move the OT through as well?
So I'm not familiar with it, but we didn't need that memo to tell us that, right? So, yeah, under IWRP, we've awarded using production, O&M. We've used production overhead, Navy working capital funds. We've used new ships construction. So there's really no limitations to tell you what funding you can use. It always comes back to the requirements and does it align to the funding application that was provided.
Thanks. So let's go ahead and wrap up, folks. And our Mid-Atlantic Tech Bridge team will send out briefs and make sure you have contact information. And we'll make sure we have all the information that Mike provided and the list of OTAs and points of contact. So I'd like to thank each panelist very much for being here. We know I heard tidbits of it, and it's very obvious everybody has multiple jobs. So thank you very much for being here. And I'd like to give each of you just maybe a minute or two to finalize any other tidbits you've thought about that you'd like to share with the audience before we conclude. And then after we finish up, or if anybody is interested, we're going to go across the street to the place called Leone's, which opens at 4 o'clock, and we can continue chatting there. Jacob, why don't you start?
Sure, thank you. So I would first like to begin by saying, well, thank you for having me here today. But what I'd like to start with is that Mystic specifically only started about 3.5 years ago. At the time, nobody knew what an OTA was out of Philadelphia. We had about 8 or so projects that were voluntold by our front office. You need to use this vehicle. Now, the amount of demand is insane. To put it simplest way. We are growing in internal resources to support that demand, and our front office is pushing very high visibility, high dollar projects through Mystic. So, Mystic is growing tremendously. We are learning from our counterparts. Um, we have about 168 million in obligation today in just those 3 years, and we just put together a project that was over, our largest award was about $134 million. So it continues to grow very quickly. It's a very great tool for the HM&E space and sustainment specifically. Our topic areas are broad purposefully for many projects to be able to be pushed through. I mentioned in the beginning of this that I come from working on minesweepers, which is one of the Navy's oldest ships. Something that was always interesting to me is it doesn't have to be brand new. It doesn't have to be in a lab to be a prototype per se. Obsolescence can also be something from a 50-year-old ship that, we have one last circuit card remaining. We need to take this apart so we can replicate this. We also have R&D. R&D is our widest and largest technology area, of course, because it is the most broad. So the 8 tech areas that we have are large, and a lot of projects can be pushed through as long as they fit within them and they are a prototype. So I'm very motivated to continue to grow this program. Again, my contact will be sent out shortly. Please reach out to me with any questions, and thank you for your time today.
Again, thanks to you all for having us here again. NISTIC was brought in, I guess, in 2019. Like I said, we had some growing pains the first couple years. We really refined our process. Our technical director, our CO of the base, they are leaning forward. Our CCO is very leaning forward on OTAs, as you can see by the number of dollar value that I talked about earlier today. We have a broad scope of technology areas. We are doing road shows with our tech departments and our PEOs. So we're getting a lot more education there where there was a little bit of reluctance. They weren't, misunderstandings of what OTA could do for them. So again, I think given the environment that we're in and the threat space that's coming to us, I think we can all imagine an uptick coming up. Thank you.
Yeah, so yes, thank you. Thank you. Really appreciate the opportunity to come and speak with you all today. And always a great time to come up to Norfolk and see some ships, because we don't see too many gray ships down in Charleston anymore unless they're at Liberty Call. So I appreciate that. I have so many things to talk about with IWRP, so many lessons learned. Y'all don't have that much time today. But what I would offer up is a larger Navy perspective, right? So the reason that the Navy is investing so heavily into OTs and really pushing these things across the enterprise is simply because it is one of our tools to provide a response to pacing threats, right? If you go back and look at the trends of the defense industrial base over the last 20 to 30 years, the defense industrial base is eroding every year, and it's increasing its exponential erosion, right? There was a graphic that I got from the Naval Postgraduate School last year, and I'll share it with y'all. But it basically showed where as the defense industrial base was dropping, the sentiment of working with the Department of Defense, Department of Navy was dropping because it's just so difficult to get an award. Nobody talks to you in a FAR-based environment. It's years before you find out if you made an award, right? On the OT and the consortia spectrum, what you see is an exponential increase in membership. And the primary drive for that is because companies, they may not want to work with the Department of Defense directly, but they're willing to join a consortium and kind of have that mediary help them engage with the government, right? And that's where a consortium is really, to me, provide a great value for the Navy, even though we could go direct if we needed to. And so I would just leave that with you is consortias, OTs, those are our tools to go fight the next war and prepare for fighting the next war. So as you engage with us, I would just please, bring your capabilities to the discussion so that we understand a little bit better how we can translate those into providing capabilities downrange to the fleet. Thank you.
Thank you again for this opportunity. It's been a pleasure being on this panel with you all and being able to come up to Norfolk. It's interesting. One of my favorite things to brief about IWRP is the growth that we've had in such a short period of time. In 2018, I think we're at a $250 million ceiling, jumped to 500 million, and now we have an undefined ceiling. We've done 1.9 billion in prototype and production awards. So really trying to streamline and reduce those barriers is important to us. We're trying to learn and grow every day. We're trying to listen to your experiences as you engage with us. And, it's going to continue on. We really want to see what you have to offer in terms of technology, pushing the edge. I would encourage you and implore you to try to stand out, really try to bring those novel capabilities. We're not trying to buy COTS off the shelf through IWRP or any of these OTAs. So that's something that we talk about often and help our TPOCs to understand. So really looking forward to engaging with you all, and thanks again.
Well, thank you, everyone. I'd like to do one final thing, which is to thank our PIA partner at the Mid-Atlantic Tech Bridge, 757 CoLab, who really does, I'd say, 98% of the work for us. The government people have the crazy ideas, and they actually execute all of our programming. So thank you to 757 CoLab to helping us with this and all of our other events. And with that, we'll conclude today, and you can enjoy the beautiful rooftop here at Assembly Norfolk for a few minutes. And then if anybody's interested, we can walk across the street and enjoy the lovely outside area at Leone's. So thanks and have a good day.